Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update, our program that helps you stay curious, connected, informed, all live and in real time. This conversation, like all of our lunch updates, is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie, and also a special thank you to our Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly, and our small and emerging business sponsor, Easy Office Products. As always, these are recorded and posted on our website, usually later in the afternoon, and so you can go to madisonbiz.com and see what you missed or share what you think others might be interested in. We know many of you do go and watch pieces of it, and so we certainly appreciate that added attention to the work that we're doing. Coming up, we will be joined by Dane County Regional Airport Director Kim Jones and City of Madison Transportation Director Tom Lynch to discuss the current state of transportation in Greater Madison and how we achieve our shared goal of increasing access to interconnected regional systems. But first, as always, here are a few chamber updates. Our sold-out icebreaker returns to the Kohl Center for the first time in 3 years next week, Wednesday, April 13th. The theme for our 8th annual event presented by CUNA Mutual Group is recalibrate, meaning let's turn our thinking to the things that need to be reevaluated or reconsidered or maybe even redone as we build for the future Greater Madison needs. Also at Icebreaker, we will be presenting the Chamber's 2022 Ground Floor Award for Small Business Leadership to Yehenia Podesta. She's the co-founder of Synergy Co-working. She's an innovator, a collaborator who has supported many small business leaders in Greater Madison with a particular commitment to empowering women, business leaders, and making sure that our region is the best place for entrepreneurs of color. At Synergy Co-working, she spearheads and supports inclusive economic empowerment and leadership initiatives and collaboration. She's also a Senior Director of Leadership and Social Impact at Vital Voices Global Partnership, an international women's leadership nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. They invest in women leaders who are taking on the world's greatest challenges. Congratulations to Yehenia on this prestigious honor. And now to our guests. Kim Jones, who we've had on the show before, was appointed Director of the Dane County Regional Airport by County Executive Joe Parisi in 2018. Kim has worked for the region, for the airport since 2004 and was named Deputy Airport Director of Finance and Administration in 2011. In that position, she was responsible for the planning, the directing, the financial management of the airport's $27 million operating budget, supervising financial operations, monitoring airport performance, and assisting the airport director with developing policies, plans, and long-term strategic vision, also making sure that the capital budgets were under control. She's a native of Iowa, and she has more than 30 years of experience in financial administration roles, including the Des Moines International Airport before coming here to Dane County. And our other guest today is Tom Lynch, who was appointed the Transportation Director for the City of Madison by Mayor Paul Soglin in 2018. Tom spent the previous 26 years working for Strand Associates and has extensive transportation planning experience with local, state, federal units of government. He has managed highly complex transportation studies, including the Monona Drive Reconstruction Project, the Verona Road Environmental Impact Statement, the Madison Beltline Planning and Environmental Linkage Study, and the John Nolan Corridor, Blair Street Corridor Design Development. He also assisted the state in developing and providing training on complete street design standards. Tom has worked in transportation planning projects in 4 different states, worked with government entities, including locally in Monona, Middleton, and Fitchburg, but also with the county and the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. So with that, welcome to each of you. Kim, we'll start with you. So we'll start the conversation there, and then I'm going to bring Tom in. But I also want to remind everyone that we welcome your questions as part of this conversation. As I said at the top, this is live. And we ask that you can certainly send questions to ask@madisonbiz.com or just put it in the chat. And if we have time, we will get to it. So first, Kim, we had you on last summer, so thanks for coming back on again. Lots happened since the last time you were on. At the time, you had reported that the Dane County Regional Airport had 36 daily departures with 11 total destinations. Pre-pandemic, we know that we'd gotten as high as 29 destinations. So we're 8 months later since the last time you were on. What updates can you share about the current offerings at the airport? How many destinations, how many daily departures are we looking at now?
So that's a really good question, and it brings to light some interesting information. So previously we had 36 daily departures. Now we have 32, but there's a change in the demographics of the planes that are used and the destinations. But the really positive note here is that our destinations have increased to 15. So we're back on the rise again, which is a very positive thing. And we've regained a couple key markets that were important to us, LaGuardia, Newark, DCA, and Las Vegas. Both of those, or I should say all four of those, were ones that we didn't have last summer when we talked. We're also very optimistic, going forward. So right now we have a 16% increase in departure capacity. So what that means is even though we have fewer flights, we have a larger number of seats available. Again, it goes back to the demographics of the plane that is used for the route. So these are very positive key indicators for us.
We've worked together on a number of bringing on new destinations, and certainly something we want to continue to do in the future. I'm curious, as when you're talking to the airlines, about what you're hearing about popular flight destinations that we had before the pandemic, like SFO, San Francisco, LAX, and LA. We notice online they say they'll come back in the fall, but that's not. We know that shifts and moves. But what are you hearing about the return of some of these previous destinations that we have?
I think for those destinations, it's not a matter of if they're going to come back. It's just a matter of when they're going to come back. It's very positive that they will. And you may notice that at certain times they'll be for sale on websites. And the interesting thing about it is the airlines isn't, and this is not something that was done historically, but post-pandemic, they'll try that and see how the sales are to kind of test the market. And if the sales are really good, then they may bring that flight in. If they're not, they'll reroute you with a connecting flight. And we've had a few instances where we've heard from passengers that has happened. So again, we're very, very positive that those flights will come back. It's just a matter of when they do. And I think they'll follow the business traveler as well. We really need to bring back the business traveler. That's key to increased growth in both our destinations, our capacity, and what we can offer here.
So what I'm hearing in that is if you're booking a flight and you see the direct, even if you think it might get canceled, book it anyway. That way it's signaling to the airlines. You might get lucky, but if nothing else, you're signaling that there's demand for those direct flights. Absolutely. How about some of the cities that we were, 2019, I think you and I were both very bullish on, where we were headed as far as number of direct destinations. I know we were talking about Boston and Houston. How do you, when you obviously want to get back to where we were, but how are airlines thinking now about new routes? I mean, how are those conversations going?
So a lot of the airlines still are not talking to airports, unfortunately, and especially in-person type meetings. But those are destinations that we will continue to push. Seattle's another one that wasn't mentioned, but that was a key one that we had hoped to get, and we're fairly confident that we would get right before the pandemic, and that kind of took us out of the market for that. But SFO and LAX are key. Boston, as you mentioned, Washington, D.C. and LaGuardia were two of our focus cities previously that we do have back now. So those are positive things for us to look at. In the middle of June, ACI, which is Airports Council International North America, which is one of our trade associations and representative groups, is hosting again what we call Jumpstart. And our previous director used to refer to it as speed dating with airlines. And that's exactly what that is. And I plan to attend this year. I've requested meetings with 12 airlines. Many of you may have seen in the news that Frontier was attempting to acquire Spirit. This week, out of the blue, JetBlue jumped into the fray, if you will, and put in an offer for Spirit as well. So it will be some time before we see that, but we're watching that very closely because we think, given that we have Frontier here currently, that could bring some positive outlooks for us as well. So we'll continue to work with the airlines as they'll agree to work with us.
So as I said at the top, you had a great career in the airport industry, and in that time, you've made a lot of connections, particularly with your peers. So I'm curious what you're hearing from other markets. I mean, what are you hearing from your peers, both in the Midwest and outside of the Midwest? Is what we're seeing typical, or is there some anomalies in what we're seeing here?
So what we're seeing is typical for markets that were business dominant. Unfortunately, we now are suffering because, as everyone knows, it's been a leisure-led recovery. So some of the peers that I have in what was historically vacation destinations, they're far exceeding their pre-pandemic numbers. They're just enjoying the high that we all were riding on as business markets previous to the pandemic. So we're continuing to lag behind a little bit. A new term that's been coined in the media lately is revenge travel. And I don't know if anybody has heard that one yet or not, but that's the person that just says, I am sick and tired of this. I am going no matter what. And they're out there traveling. And that's having some impact on, activity in markets as well. So unfortunately, we're still lagging a little behind. At the end, I think I have this here for myself, actually. At the end of 2021, we had 706,472 enplanements that departed from Madison. That was up 65% from the previous year, but it's still only about 65% of where we were pre-pandemic in 2019. So we've really got some ways to go still.
I'm definitely one of those revenge travelers. I had not heard that, but you can count me among those people that leave from Madison too. So the TSA extended the mask mandate, and that impacts both airports and airlines. But we are seeing some pushback from the major airlines. They're asking for relief both on testing and on masks. The April 18th is the next kind of decision point for masks at the federal level. What are you hearing, or what do you anticipate coming on the heels of that potential expiration?
So we'd like to think that it would end. It's a very interesting situation for the airlines. The airlines themselves want the mask mandate eliminated. The Pilots Association wants it eliminated. It's the flight attendants who are actually opposed to it, which, if you think about it, is interesting because they're the ones who are getting the pushback from the passengers and facing, all of the concerns and the disruptive passenger, if you will. But yet they're the ones who also have the closest contact with the passenger. But I do think that we're going to see some modification to that. I'm kind of hearing that could happen, whether it will be a complete elimination of the mandate or if it will be a modified elimination. For example, maybe they won't be required to have them in the airport, but they will have to have them on the aircraft still. It's hard to say at this point, but I think that we will definitely see some modification to that. We've been very fortunate here that, given our community, the travelers have been very understanding and cooperative, and we haven't seen a lot of problems, which we're very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, that's good news. Tom, let me bring you in here. Madison Metro, which reports into your office, is also impacted by the federal mask mandate. And you can see the buses, the Metro buses around town still say mask required on the digital displays. Does that have an impact on ridership? I mean, what are we seeing overall when it comes to masks on buses?
Yeah, I don't know if it really has an impact on ridership. And different people have different tolerances for risk. We're starting to have in-person meetings here, and even, half of the people are wearing masks and half of the people aren't. I will say, though, it is one more thing for our drivers to keep track of. So, and one more thing that they have to monitor, which is difficult. Because they are also, you think about it, they're pulling away from a bus stop, they're driving, but they also have to watch, is everyone being compliant, or if someone's entering the bus. So I think it's been most difficult on our drivers.
Are you hearing anything about the order and whether expiration, continuation changes, anything different than what Kim?
No, but I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of follow in concert. They're both traveling group, they're transporting groups of people. And so.
Right. So last month we had Professor David McDonald on the program. He's an expert of all things on Vladimir Putin and Tsarist Russia. But we brought him in to discuss the war in Ukraine. And obviously there's an impact, not just in that region, but there's a global impact, and it dominates the headlines. Things that we read beyond the horrific loss of life and the potential crimes of war, is the cost of oil and uncertainty around travel, and what those things, how those correlate. I guess I'm curious. I'll start with you, Kim. What are you seeing as far as fuel costs for the airlines, and then are we seeing that translated into increased fares?
So the airlines are seeing increased fuel costs. Some of them were fortunate to have enough stock or futures such that they were protected for a little while, but the fares are definitely on the rise. And I would caution any passenger, look at various dates. Do not lock yourself into specific dates if you don't have to. Just yesterday, I heard of a situation where one of my peers saved $2,500 by simply changing his return date by one day.
Wow.
And so we are definitely seeing, impacts to the fares, and it's a concern. And I think this is partly, if you will, brought to light this term revenge travel, because the passengers are saying, we don't care the cost. We're going, we're done, we're going. And that term has just recently come out. And I think in part it relates to that. So we're definitely going to see increased fares into the future. And depending on what happens with the oil markets in Europe, especially, if there are restrictions there and sanctions that take place, I think we're going to continue to see the prices rise, potentially exponentially.
Right. Tom, obviously, despite the great work that you're doing to change the fuel mixture and of the fleet at Metro, we still have a number of diesel operated buses. How about for the city? How are the fuel prices impacting the fleet at Metro?
Yeah, right now we're locked in. I think we're locked in for a year, so we're doing we're doing good. We will have to consider that though in our operating budget, because we will submit our operating budget for 23 in July, and so what's the crystal ball? Because eventually our contract will expire for our fuel, and then what do we assume is going to be the new contract?
So just to clarify for the audience, so the city goes out and buys the fuel on a contract ahead of time, and then it's a fixed price, goes up, you benefit, goes down, you don't.
Yes.
Got it. Kim, last time you were on, you were bullish, excited about the expansion at the airport. I was just there yesterday. It's going up fast. And so I guess I'm just looking for you about, what's the latest update on the expansion? What are the kind of milestones? And while you do that, we'll put just some renderings up on the screen so that people can see.
Okay. I am still overly excited about this. Next week, our last piece of structural steel will be installed, and the new structure should be completed by the end of this year. Our phase 2, which is the demolition of the old south end, will be completed by the middle of next year, 2023. We're excited about the potential new concession offerings, and just the facility is going to be amazing and beautiful. So I continue to be very, very excited about that.
I saw somewhere that there was a living room.
Yes.
What is I just read about it somewhere, but tell us a little bit about what the living room is.
That's one of the corners that you had up on your renderings there. And it has all glass panels, and it is very tall ceilings and very comfortable seating, and just an area where we want people, it's the transition area, if you will, between the old and the new. And we just want people to feel comfortable to go in there and sit down and take a break if they want to, or rest, and before they continue the journey on to the end of the new terminal. And the new offerings are just going to be amazing. That's all I'm going to say for now.
All right. Well, how can the business community best support the airport? What do you need the business community's help with right now?
You need them to fly again, to start traveling. That is the most important thing they can do. It's important for them to know it's safe to travel. It's okay to travel. And the airlines will respond to the data. regarding demand. So if we show that the demand is there, they will bring the flights. It's kind of like the old Field of Dreams analogy. If you build it, they will come. If you fly it, they will come. And then once we have it, use it or lose it. So,
All right.
best thing. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So Tom, obviously a lot of the conversation that Kim and I are having was about, about the connectivity and access to major metros. We know the economic impact is one of the reasons why the chamber so closely partners with the airport, is to try to, maximize that competitive advantage that direct access has. It sounds like we're getting closer and closer to a new intercity rail service that would connect Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago, and maybe even beyond. We all know and lament, or most of us, the majority of us lament what happened a decade ago with the loss of that opportunity. But now Amtrak has a new bold vision for expansion of service. And that vision has brought back the prospect that Madison could be in play again. And I know the city's a big proponent of it. The chamber's been a big proponent of it. We've lobbied on it. The mayor's lobbied on it. We've even seen predictions that this could happen in the next 5 years. How likely do you think that is? When you're looking at the new vision, the new plans, how likely do you think a short-term or near-term win would be? And then follow up to that is what would we have to do to make that a reality?
Yeah, well, we'll need help, right? So the new bipartisan infrastructure bill has 560% more money for passenger rail than it previously did. Just the amount of funding for it is enormous, and it's really unprecedented. So if we're going to do it, now is the time to do it. Right now, there's a little bit of complications about who can sponsor a project. Does it have to be a state? Can it be a compact? What role can Amtrak have? And so we have to work that out and work with our partners. As a city, we're doing what we can. We've released an RFP for a station location study, and we just got our proposals in. And so we'll be in that process over the next 9 months. But we'll need the business community to advocate for this too. Sometimes this can be a red-blue type thing, and transportation is not a red-blue thing. It's just, if we have connections, it's a good thing for everyone. And so if employers as well as industries say, this helps us, that will help us get over it. And I will say that right now the focus is really on Amtrak's vision of bringing an extension of the Hiawatha. High speed maybe sometime in the future, and that would be great. But right now, if we can get service, to the Milwaukee, Chicagoland area, that would be huge.
Yeah, I'm going to share I put up the entire map, but let me just show the Midwest map there, Tom. And so the Chicago to Milwaukee dark blue line that would have the yellow line hugging it for both existing and enhancement. And then you can see the continuation of that, and then the Madison piece there. Explain that that route there. So it looks like Economowoc, Watertown, and then what is that? What is the
so it's interesting. In the recently released Midwest Rail Plan, which was just October, they say that Madison's a key market to get, and so it's a little bit out of the way, but they feel like it's a very important market for the success of the line. It would be coming in. And the natural way for it to go would be to go on that rail right around First Street and is it Burr Stevens Field, through the WSOR yard there on Johnson and up to the north. Now there may be opportunities to site a station. Some people would like it downtown, which would require the train to back up a little bit. Some would like it at first, some would like it in the Oscar Mayer area. And so that's what the study will do, but it will be coming in from Watertown, and where it goes to Minneapolis is right around there at First Street where you see that bend.
So Kim, let me bring you back in there. So obviously, as Tom just said, that one of the options, and likely at least one of the certain path in whether it goes downtown or stops short of downtown, is it would be coming within the proximity of the airport, not directly to the airport, but proximity. How do you think about intercity rail as a multimodal opportunity for the airport?
So the airport has what we call an airport layout plan. It's a multi-page document that is required by the FAA for every airport to have. And one of the things that we've put in there for future planning is the site for a potential multimodal station. So we're preparing for the event that that does happen. We have options for rerouting some of our existing international lane as well to accommodate that. So we're prepared in the event that that should happen.
Great. I'll probably come back to you on BRT on that one too. So I'll be back on that one. But so Tom, let's go from we've affectionately termed this planes, trains, and automobiles, but we should probably call it planes, trains, buses, and automobiles. So Tom, Metro's currently working on a network redesign plan. We've seen open houses and opportunity for the public to comment. And the restructuring service would start soon, like 2023. Can you tell us about the plan, its goals, and what changes do you think, even though it's early, I'm not asking to get too far ahead of the full public input, but what, if you were to predict out what service changes do you think might be coming in the coming years?
Yeah, so, our service plan right now is really morphed over the past 20 years. And it's kind of like a house where you keep on adding another room and then another shed and room. And pretty soon you get to the point where maybe we should just buy a new house, and that's kind of what our network is right now. It really doesn't serve low income or people of color very well. They have to transfer 2 to 3 times as often, and they often have rides longer than 45 minutes, which is kind of a threshold for us. So our goal is to provide better service and really service that will take us over the next couple decades. We've received policy direction both from public surveys as well as our Transportation Planning and Policy Board to focus on more frequency, so that rather than having to check a schedule, well, the bus won't come for 45 minutes, so I should do something. Just to have a frequency so that you don't have to check a schedule. If you show up at the bus stop, a bus will be coming pretty soon. So what will that mean? It will mean that people will probably have shorter trips, but they might have to walk a little bit longer to get to that high frequency service. One example might be if I pick a trip like Park Street and Badger versus going to, let's say, Park Street and University. Right now, that trip takes about 31 minutes, but there's not really much walking. With the new network redesign, it would only take 21 minutes, but you'd have 2 minutes of extra walking because you have to, so that's the policy direction we've been given. They've come up with a draft plan. There's a series of amendments, up to 10 amendments that will be voted on, to address areas where people are having concerns.
One of the maybe most exciting additions to our transit system that's coming soon is the high profile bus rapid transit, or BRT. I think most of our viewers are aware of it and the value. The chambers, I generally say this until the end of the day, each day, is that we've supported BRT before the city supported BRT. Mm-hmm. And so we know it's something that it was long overdue, something that we're going to need, especially as you're talking about the west corridor and the speed of transit. And I'm going to again share my screen. I think it's important that we understand why BRT helps. And this is one of the city slides, but it shows the connection between the employment centers and workers. So where population is and where employment centers are, and you can see how much it follows that east-west route and that north-south route that would eventually happen. I think it's I know it's universally popular for that purpose. Obviously, there had been some discussions over the last couple of years about routing, and certainly downtown has received a lot of attention. And from a business perspective, the conversation about how do you route it around the square, what's the role that State Street plays, and that piece met the most opposition. I'm curious as to why what's the thinking from the city perspective, and I know it's decided, so I'm not looking to rehash it, but why is the city so certain that BRT on State Street is an important element of the transit mix?
Yeah, so State Street's really a key destination. It's been a cultural destination with transit on it probably for almost 100 years. You think about it, and so we feel it's really important to serve that. When we, in fact, I actually went out and surveyed, and you go to the bus shelters and you ask, well, why are you taking the bus here? And they say, well, I just shopped here, or I went to this event here, or I worked here. 250,000 boardings on the north, or I guess it's the east portion of State Street. When we looked at alternate routings, and we looked at a lot of, all of them were longer, and they provided worse service than what exists today. And so the thought was, well, why would we do BRT with worse service than what we have today with our existing buses? And then some of it too has to do with the role of the stations and how much space they take up. Some alders want us to do an analysis of placing the stations on Gorham and Johnson Street. And Gorham is not as problematic, but Johnson Street would reduce it by a lane. It increases more than quadruples the traffic delay on Johnson with queues of 1,000 feet. So those are kind of the key reasons.
And one of the other things that came up other than routing was the shelter size. I think I didn't hear a lot of disagreement on the design, but the size of it seemed to, and some of the see-through ability of it, how see-through was it, whether it was opaque or not. I know some changes have been made to the design in response to business concerns. Can you talk a little bit about what those changes are?
Yeah, I feel like we have tried to be responsive to the context. We are removing all bus service off of Lower State Street. So west of Gorham, there won't be any bus service. So that's kind of a blank slate. We're consolidating the 8 bus stops into 2 bus stops. So you think about every bus shelter that you see on State Street, those will be removed. And so that provides more sidewalk space. And we've basically taken the shelter size and cut it to about 1/3 of what it will be in other locations, just trying to make the context of the shelter fit with that. And this is an example of the one that is in front of Madison Market. You can see the existing bus shelter, and then top left of this slide, and then the proposed bus shelter right there on the lower left. And so it is a little bit larger. It will have a platform. The platform we feel is very important for those who are differently abled, and need wheelchairs. But we've tried to make this context sensitive as possible.
Do you think that in your mind is the matter settled?
Well, right now we're the 60% designs are going through the committee process. They just went to Board of Public Works last Wednesday. We hope it's scheduled, otherwise settled. Otherwise, there'll be delays, but it's still going through the public process right now.
Yeah, as I talked about, there's a correlation between economic opportunity and proximity to transit stations, that same kind of correlation applies to the thinking on infill and transit-oriented development. Do you see opportunity and risk in how transit routes have the potential to shift economic center of gravity? I didn't hear that in your explanation for why State Street, but I've heard it as one of the arguments of, to Kim's point earlier about if you build it, they will come, and what that can do to create a change in shopping behavior, dining behavior, economic behavior. And so do you, as you think about it nationally and looking at other cities, what are the opportunities and the risks about where we route BRT? Yeah,
actually, it's the opportunities are really huge. It's a huge driver. There's been study after study that talks about the economic benefits of high frequency transit, particularly ones where there's a substantial infrastructure investment. Cleveland, Eugene, Cleveland alone, which is probably the oldest BRT system in the United States, or one of the oldest, $9.5 billion $9.5 billion of reinvestment in the corridor. And what that does is it kind of provides higher densities near transportation that's sustainable, right? If you think about it. And so when you drive down East Washington, a lot of it has converted to higher densities, which is more efficient, it's more friendly for the environment. But a lot of it is, one-story buildings that have been there for 50 years. We can have higher and better uses, that are closer to a sustainable transportation.
As I said, we're going to go east-west first, and then, the hope is we'll go north-south. What has to happen for us to be able to get to that, the sort of all four direction type of system?
Yeah, well, we have design monies for the north-south in our 23 capital improvement budget. So hopefully that will make it through the budget and appropriation this year. And we could put construction monies as soon as 2025. Right now, the bipartisan infrastructure law has just a lot of money also for transit. And so we'd like to capitalize on that. In fact, I'd like to maybe make a small announcement. Like about 10 days ago, we were just awarded another $23 million from the FTA for our BRT project. So where we were getting $80 million from the small starts, now we're getting $103 million so that we can convert our fleet fully to electric. The BRT will be fully electric. So it's just exciting. Now is the time to be making investments in rail and transit, and that's what we're going to try and do.
Yeah, that was an exciting development. I know it was one of the goals of the city to have a fully electric system, and so it was an exciting development. Kim, how about if obviously we got to go east-west first, but then there's the potential for north-south. Similar to the question I asked you about rail, how would BRT fit into your thinking around moving people into and out of the airport?
I think it would provide some real opportunities for staffing out here. Staffing continues to be a problem for everybody out here, and affordable transportation that's reliable. We do have bus service, but it's somewhat limited. And as Tom mentioned, the service to some of the populations that would seek to work in the service industry are not as desirable as they could be. So I think the BRT would be really beneficial to us. There's been some cities, Boston, for example, that have direct routes to the airport that are very frequently used. I think they call theirs the Silver Line, if I'm correct, that goes directly between cruise ports and airport and other areas of the city. So I think that if we could get that mentality to some of the public that wants to travel as well, to use that service, that would be wonderful for us.
Agreed. So Tom, onto roads, even though BRT is road based, but we're now entering road construction season as the weather breaks. We're seeing the potholes starting to get filled, and but road construction overall has a significant impact on business, particularly small destination type businesses. And it's one of the reasons why the city and the chamber partnered years ago to develop the road construction survival guide. We just heard recently that your friends over at Economic Development are going to do an updated iteration. So we're excited about that. But it also it can instill fear in businesses about what's going to happen. I'm just curious as to, when you're looking at the total system, what road projects do you think will begin this spring?
Well, I think everyone on this already knows, right? Because you've already had to travel through it. We have, the Blair Street, Williamson Street intersection is just a difficult intersection right now. It's a difficult one to construct under traffic. University Avenue, I think that has already started as well. I heard this morning, and that will be a challenging one. And then there'll be quite a few local reconstruction projects on local roads, but probably not as arterial based, you might say. In the future, we hope that our BRT project will start this fall, and so that that's 32 stations from east to west, and so that's East Washington, Mineral Point Road. You'll see that There's a chance that Atwood Avenue will be funded, so that's kind of over by the Old Brick Gardens area, and that would be next year as well. And then a little bit longer term is John Nolan Drive. Right now, engineering's in development, and that could go all the way from Olin Avenue almost to North Shore. And so that would be a big project as well. That might be more in the 25, 26 timeframe.
Yeah. If you drive the Beltline at all, you can, I was going to say there are changes coming in the near future, but if you're driving it, you can see them. I mean, the other day I was driving, I was like, I don't remember that barrier being so close to my driver's side door. But you can see signs going up, and there's some yellow lines that are in. The signs are masked right now, but the new flex lanes look like they're, within a short period of time of being unveiled. Can you tell us about the flex lane project and how it'll work?
Yeah, actually, I was involved with that a little bit before I was with the city. It's flex lane is basically opening up the shoulder dynamically through signs overhead during the peak hours. So when you need that capacity, it's there. But when you don't need that capacity, it returns to its function as a shoulder. And so really what it does is it takes your freeway footprint and it allows you to get more out of it. You don't have to do a big reconstruction project that costs $500 million to add lanes on the outside. It's occurring in like 18 different states, Minneapolis, Chicago, and you've probably driven through a flex lane or a shoulder running lane without even knowing it. And as you mentioned, right now in the Todd Drive in the eastbound direction, you travel basically in the lane that is going to be the flex lane, the shoulder lane, because that's how they had to detour. So you did it and you did notice it. But I think a lot of people were traveling in that lane and almost didn't notice it because it's pretty natural. Well,
to be candid, I probably traveled it a dozen times before I actually realized it was.
Okay. Yeah.
Real quick, I want to get to bicycles. So I guess it's plane, trains, automobiles, buses, and bicycles. We have to keep expanding out the name of the show. But what's the state of the bike system right now? Obviously, it's an important piece, something that we're noted for internationally. We've seen some pretty big improvements over the last few years, connection to neighboring communities. What improvements would you like to see coming up?
Yeah, right now we're in the middle of a complete green streets plan that will kind of establish modal hierarchies and typologies. And a real focus is probably going to be on establishing the all ages and abilities network. And an all ages and abilities network is one where you feel comfortable allowing your 11-year-old daughter to go to the store, right? It's one thing to have a bike lane next to 20,000 vehicles, but it's another thing where it's protected and you feel comfortable for anyone to use that. And so that will probably be an emerging focus. The BRT projects is going to give us 2 miles of a side path on Mineral Point Road. So that's going to be good. We're going to see the extension of the Cannonball Trail go from a fish hatchery to Wingra path, and that's going to be good. And then there may be opportunities to connect the Capitol Trail with the Glacial Drumlin Trail in Cottage Grove. That's really been stalled for about 20 years, but recently there's been some new opportunities and openings that might allow us to get that connection, and that would be really great as well.
Great. Well, we're at 1 o'clock, so for the only question I didn't get to, which was the one I was most excited about, which was the innovation in electric vehicles and what the future holds. So maybe we'll have to have you on again to talk about what the future holds for self-driving cars and autonomous driven vehicles. But with that, I want to thank both you, Kim. Thank you very much for continuing to be a great partner. Tom, same to you. Thank you for joining us today and being a partner and listening to the concerns and understanding that we're all in this together. But I think having you both on illustrates both the opportunity, but but also the reality of where we live is that all of this is interconnected, that we can't do these things independently and that we have to make sure that we're working together. So thank you for that partnership. I also want to thank all of you for joining us today. And I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Parkins Coie, as well as our other sponsors, Baker Tilly and Easy Office Products, for supporting this program. We'll see you next time. Take care.